why do we say control? Because we want to control a hazard. So what is the hazard here? The hazard the hazard for reopening schools is COVID-19, right? So COVID-19 transmission. So that's the hazard here. We're talking about the virus and the transmission, or what or who transmits the virus. Now, this public health principle is applicable not only to COVID-19, but to all other public health issues actually. No, so there are different types of hazards. So let's take a look. Again, I said it's an inverted triangle. So it says here on top is elimination, wherein you physically remove the hazard. That's the best. Substitution, you substitute it, the hazard for something safer. Engineering control, which is you isolate people from the hazard. Administrative controls, which is you change the way people work. And then PPE, which is you can't remove the hazard, so you just protect the person with personal protective equipment. So there, so those are the classic levels of the hierarchy of control. So let's go through it one by one. So the first is elimination, physically remove the hazards. So unlike the other hazards, which are things like fire, sharp objects, slippery surfaces, so for COVID-19, we cannot easily identify where the virus is. So that's the challenge there. So what do we do? First, we cannot eliminate classes. That is impossible. So next is we cannot eliminate people who may harbor the virus. You cannot, remove them from attending the school. At most, we can do disinfection, but usually the disinfection really applies only for surfaces, not really air or aerosols or humans. So there. So elimination is not really that applicable in the COVID-19 context. The second one is substitution. So since it is hazardous the past 2 years to go to school because there is the risk of COVID-19 transmission, we substituted face-to-face classes with online learning. So then you remove the hazard of the face-to-face engagement wherein transmission can occur. So we use online learning. But we know already by now that this is temporary. It is not really sustainable. It is not a long-term solution for our children, for our school system. Okay? There are a lot of limitations to online learning. So let's take a look at other countries. So other countries also went into online learning. Actually, almost majority of the countries. But by now, the countries have all reopened already. But if initially, you have countries like Italy and Indonesia, when they reopened, it wasn't a complete reopening. It was also gradual or partial. So, like Indonesia reopened at 50% capacity with the other half learning online, and then they gradually went up. Then for us, we know from DO 12 2020 of DepEd, we really absolutely replaced classes with online with online learning. Sorry, this is Philippines replaced classes with other learning opportunities. The third one is engineering controls, which is isolating people from the hazard. And perhaps the most important engineering control for COVID-19 is increasing ventilation, which I think in most, if not all, DepEd classroom settings should not really be a problem. Your schools are usually have very good windows, good ventilation. So that is the advantage of the current public school design, no? So okay, so ventilation. Placing of barriers was previously implemented, but if it hinders ventilation and learning, also you cannot hear each other, you cannot see each other, then it should not be used. So barriers, like acrylic barriers, these are, or previously the face shield, this is protection against splashes. That is the use of the barrier, okay? It's not really for the airborne transmission, it's really for the splashes, okay? COVID-19 and other similar pathogens are airborne, no? Or transmitted to droplets. There, so that's why ventilation is very important. And you can see here that engineering controls is in the middle. It's higher than administrative controls and PPE. Let's see what's worked elsewhere. Italy and Hong Kong adjusted the distance between desks for social distancing. China and South Korea also uses social distancing. What did not work? Okay, so Israel, there was one school that had an outbreak of 260 people because they made exemptions on mask use and had continuous air conditioning during a heat wave. And because they closed off the windows, they put on the air conditioning, this really, this was very good environment for the viruses to, to transmit. So there, so that's an example of what happens when you remove ventilation. The fourth one is administrative controls. So administrative controls include policy changes like zoning in terms of space and time, having different time slots for the use of the canteen, having permanent seat assignments. So let me explain. So we try to limit people, right? Limit them from intermingling or mixing. Because later on, when you do the contact tracing, and the contacts are defined as having epidemiological links, right? In space and time, which we talked about in module 14. With zoning, you try to minimize that mixing. At least you have little bubble, or and it's easier to do contact tracing. Okay, so there. There, so those are administrative controls. So you are unable to really remove transmission, but at least you're trying to minimize the risk through decreasing mobility by having mini bubbles, and therefore decreasing potential contacts.